I think this may be my last video because I'm on to retire. And this is the most important one because the world is duped into believing that we were born certain ways. Well, I can tell you something. We were all born sinners. And the wrath of God is revealed against all unrighteousness. Particularly, though, there's some sin that's very, very particularly bad. It's a sin against the soul, causing so much shame, and that's sexual sin. That sin hurts people really bad in their soul. Now, you could say, oh, well, we were born like that. Yes, you were born sinners. That's very true. Well, if we were born that way, then we should have the right to do whatever we want to do that way and choose whatever type of partner we want. Except for the thing is that you are created by a God who made that type of sin very bad for the soul. And you could say, oh, well, it's a social construct. No, the idea that it's a social construct is leaving off the idea that you have a conscience and you've seared it. You've seared your conscience so that you can't accept the guilt of what you do or the shame. You can't accept it, so you have to make it okay. And if there was no God, that would be fine. Or you can say, well, but God doesn't have a right to tell us how to live. Well, if you're created, yes, he does. But he made us this way. He's going to condemn us. Well, God is God. He's a fearful and wrathful God, and he made the earth a certain way. And he made man a certain way. And yes, he made them sinners. Oh, yes, it says in the garden, God made all things good. But if you read Romans chapter 5, it clearly says that there was sin in the world, but there was no sin imputed upon them because there was no law. So when they ate of that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, sin came upon them because they were cognizant of the law. God purposely made a crop that was destroyed. Everybody was destroyed in a flood. Death came into the world. And you were like, why did God do this? Well, God did this because of pride. Not just the law or legalism, but because of pride. Because those who exalt themselves and make themselves out to be holier than thou, or think that they can do what they want because there's no God or they're above God. But God made an order in the world. And then he sent his son, Yeshua, the Messiah, Yeshu, the Messiah, Jesus, so that all that believe on him will be forgiven, so that their righteousness comes from him, and for them to embrace holiness and goodness. And that goodness was the plan for God to adopt his children. Now, you might fault God, you might hate God, you might say that why did God make it that way? You can say that all they want, but if God is the true God, and I do believe he is, then it doesn't matter what you think at all, does it? What matters is you better be scared. You better have the fear of the Lord, and you better go down to your knees and look to the cross that took the pride, that took the sin, and said, look, I made man to be set apart to be righteous, but he cannot be righteous by himself. He's a sinner. But once he understands the truth that sets him free from the guilt and the shame and becomes what God created him to be, and that would be righteous. Now, we can't be completely righteous until our bodies are resurrected into a perfect body. But we live a life to glorify God in our bodies for our reason. And anyone who accepts sexual immorality doesn't understand that God created you not for that. The body was not made for that. And you can rail against it, you can hate God for it, but I can tell you this, it's not going to do you any good in the judgment, is it? When the time comes, when you look to God and say, we have a right, shake your fist at God to do what we want to do. You have no right to condemn us. Go ahead. Look up at God and keep shaking your fist, because you know what's going to happen? It's not going to be pretty. So repent to the truth and understand that there are riches waiting for you and a righteous and clear conscience and a pure soul. And if you think that it's okay for man to go against nature, by the way, nature doesn't, oh, well, there's animals that do it that way. You look at what is made in nature, and a man and a woman and a male and a female come together to make a baby. And if you think a man and a man can make a baby, then you're too sick to be saved. But you're not, because God can change your mind, and I pray he does. It goes against nature, it goes against the conscience, and it goes against God. Now you might think, oh, well, no, you have a right to be what you want. Then God doesn't have a right to judge you. And the truth is that you're not God. And the truth is that as much as you say God doesn't have a right, when the day comes, when the judgment day comes, you're not going to have a word to say. So please repent. God bless.